Russia's latest helicopter gunship is the Mil-24D. It's armed with rockets and machine guns. And even at this altitude, above Kabul, the capital of revolutionary Afghanistan, it can fly on attack missions for more than 2 hours at a time and destroy a rebel-held village in a matter of minutes. In the mountain valleys around Kabul, the winter snows are now at last beginning to melt, and every day, as many as 30 of these helicopters with Afghan markings are flying sorties to areas controlled by the guerrillas. When we asked Afghan government officials about the purpose of these flights, we were told that they were delivering essential supplies. Kabul's airport, where the gunships are based, is now a heavily guarded military garrison where Western cameras aren't exactly encouraged. The Russians have complete air superiority with continual transport flights from Tashkent and Moscow. But from this direction, we've often heard the distant sound of shooting and explosions. Officially, these are attributed to ammunition testing and blasting at a quarry. The Russians also control the main roads into Kabul and use them for frequent and heavily guarded convoys. At the capital's boundaries, they and the Afghan army have set up checkpoints and communications posts. Beyond here is a no-man's land. In the jargon on this side of the war, the outside threat comes not from the Mujahideen or the Warriors of God, but from a few groups of bandits, mercenaries and counter-revolutionaries, backed, it's claimed, by China, the United States and Pakistan. The war in Afghanistan is also, of course, a propaganda war. The guerrillas have taken groups of Western journalists trekking through huge mountainous areas they claim to control, and they've even organised one escorted visit to the second largest city, Kandahar. Well, the government tell us that they control the cities and they're quite happy to fly us all over the country to see for ourselves if it weren't for the Afghan weather, which is a very plausible excuse, only one which we can't check ourselves. As it is, we're confined to the city, Kabul. We have to have special permission for everything we film, and government guides are in almost constant attendance. In Afghanistan, there are now about 10,000 Soviet civilian advisors and their families. Most of them live in 2 large housing complexes on the outskirts of Kabul. The estates were built with Russian aid and include Russian shops and clinics. From time to time, the area has been attacked by the guerrillas, but security precautions are no worse than in, say, Belfast. Most Russian families seem to spend 2 or 3 years here on contract and are laden with Afghan souvenirs when the time comes to leave. Russia has been sending civilian advisors to Afghanistan for more than 25 years, long before her latest military intervention. After the revolution of 1978, they started to extend their influence into all fields of government. And it wasn't long before Russian officials at the highest level were giving policy advice in most of the ministries in Kabul. Afghanistan began to appear as a willing new Soviet satellite.
If you are truly independent from the Soviet Union, how do you differ from the Soviet Union in policy?
We are independent, non-aligned country. Soviet Union, that is the difference. Afghanistan is non-aligned country.
But do you differ from the Soviet Union at all?
But
in anything?
we support the general policy of Soviet Union. So what Soviet Union is against colonialism, neo-colonialism, imperialism, Zionism, racism, apartheid, discrimination, fascism. We are also against this.
But do you disagree
Soviet
with
Union defend peace, the freedom of the peoples, national independence, national liberation movement, progress, social progress in the world. We support also this.
Do you disagree with the Soviet Union on any matter of policy or principle?
Not at all.
Shut up.
The regime has been particularly keen for us to film the more positive aspects of the Russian involvement. The Soviet influence in sport in Afghanistan is one of the least sensitive areas. Since the boycott at the Moscow Olympics, Afghanistan has been training 16 national teams with 6 Soviet instructors whose services are free. Russia is also providing sporting equipment and this year has offered 20 sporting scholarships so that promising young Afghan athletes can train in the socialist bloc. Supporters of the revolutionary cause in Afghanistan are recruited at the earliest age. In Kabul, the Russians have built a special kindergarten where the children of the party's senior supporters are under the guidance of Galina, a music teacher from Moscow. Friends, we have built our country out of reaction, they sing. We've replaced the old regime with a new republic. The Avicenna Chest Clinic in Kabul is another institution where we've been allowed to film Russians at work. It was built 40 years ago and at one time received some American aid. Now, 4 of its doctors are Russian, as are most of its equipment and drugs. The only common language between the Russians and their Afghan colleagues is English.
As you see, the systolic murmur may be due to dilatation of the heart. It was 151 in the right arm in sitting position.
Why did you come to Afghanistan? Was it compulsory posting or was it of your own free choice?
Why I did come to Afghanistan? Okay, I will tell you. I'm doctor. I want to help people, patient. It is the main reason why I come in Afghanistan. Do you satisfied?
But it was your own free choice that you came here. You were not
it's my
sent
free,
here.
only free choice. Only free choice, nothing.
How secure do you feel as a Russian when you walk around Kabul?
No, it's not problem for me. You know why?
But what about walking around in the city, in Kabul, in the bazaar?
I have no time to walk.
You never go into the city?
If they do, it is no problem. Actually, there's no problem.
But we've also managed, surreptitiously, to film Russian troops in Kabul, the other side of the Soviet involvement which the regime would rather play down. One of their favourite off-duty haunts seems to be Chicken Street. Before the intervention, as it's called here, shopkeepers did a thriving business with Western tourists. Today, Russian troops, from all accounts, are a poor substitute. They come in groups with only a few rubles each, trying to buy trinkets at the end of a 6-month tour of duty. It's also widely claimed that they've augmented their earnings with the proceeds of a flourishing black market in military spare parts. The Russians have had between 80 and 100,000 troops in Afghanistan since the invasion. Today, on the streets of Kabul, their presence is not obvious and the general atmosphere seems remarkably relaxed. Everywhere we've been taken for Russians ourselves, but haven't noticed any hostility from the locals. Soviet diplomats insist that security in Kabul is now entirely the responsibility of the Afghan authorities, although Russian help and advice, no doubt, are always close at hand. There are constant police and army checkpoints by day throughout the city, and there's still a curfew at night. Tanks then emerge to man roadblocks in the city centre. The capital of Kabul is a deceptively modern city where on the surface life seems to continue as normal. Since the Soviet intervention, the population has increased by more than 500,000, as many villagers from the surrounding countryside have migrated to the capital for its greater security. In the back streets of the bazaars, the local economy appears to thrive. Here, the rhetoric of the revolution seems to have little effect on what's still a largely feudal society of entrepreneurs. The Russians are widely blamed for the way the prices of many basic foodstuffs have more than trebled in the last 2 years, but none of the critics is keen to voice opposition in public. What do you think of the government of Babrak Kemal?
It's a very good government, very nice. They are helping the poor people and everywhere. Maybe the country is going to promote more as promoting everything.
Do you want the Russian troops to stay here, or do you want them to go?
Well, it's up to the policy of the government. That's just we are the people who are walking about.
But what do you feel yourself? Are you pleased to see the Soviet forces here or not?
I want just the progress of the country. The country must go forward, not backward. And this is anybody who is working in the country must want the development of the country. This is a very big problem. Eh?
But do you feel happy about the fact that there are Soviet
we are
troops
happy.
here?
Everybody is happy.
The regime is obviously eager to attract support. There's a wide range of Western goods on display. Many of these items have been brought by road from Pakistan through territory which the guerrillas control, and there's a flourishing business with West Germany and Japan. The regime has tolerated this local capitalism and concentrated instead on appealing to a more fundamental opposition. The guerrillas have accused the government of being against Islam and claim that the Russians and the Afghan army have destroyed many mosques in the villages they control. In Kabul, there's no sign of any such campaign, and at Friday prayers, the congregation at the main mosque is overflowing into the courtyard. But there are still deep and mutual suspicions between the party and the faithful. One student at Kabul University has told me that he thinks all these people are uneducated and prejudiced because they believe in God. Babrak Kemal's regime is trying to undermine the guerrillas' claim that the revolution is anti-religious. The government has recently paid for the much publicised renovation of several mosques, has paid for their heating, and is trying to recruit Islamic officials for various committees. The revolution's leaders claim that they will not change traditional practices and that their proposals for a settlement are based on secular arguments.
We, as you know, have from the very first days of the revolution, we have announced we are independent, non-aligned Islamic country. And then we will continue to be non-aligned. And of course, if the Soviet limited contingents are here in Afghanistan, that is our right, the right of an independent country, every independent country actually. Whenever it sees some threat to its independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity, it has the right actually to ask its friends for some sort of assistance. And we did that. And that also, according to the treaty, which we had signed already with the Soviet Union on 5th December 1978, namely the Treaty of Friendship, Good Neighborliness and Cooperation.
But if the Soviet troops left now, how could your government possibly survive?
Why? Well, we have our own army, we have our own party, we have our own soldiers of revolution, we have also groups of the people cooperating with the government against these counter-revolutionary elements.
But how much?
All means at our disposals. But of course, the only problem which we still have is that probably at this stage it is difficult for us actually to encounter the external threat. And that is why they are here.
The Tsar, or April Revolution of 1978, was the start of the latest chapter in Afghanistan's turbulent history. Before then, the monarchy had controlled Kabul, but it had little influence over the provinces, which were largely feudal and self-governing. Nur Muhammad Taraki, the man who seized power, was a frequent and honoured guest in Moscow. He visited the Kremlin with official delegations and soon, in Afghanistan, was setting in motion an ambitious program of land reform. He tried to impose a Soviet-style system on feudal communities which were deeply conservative and traditionally hostile to outside interference. The delight of some of the peasantry was matched by continual wranglings about the pace of change and fierce divisions within the ruling party. In 1979, Taraki died in circumstances which were never explained, and Taraki's foreign minister, Hafizullah Amin, the champion of one of the factions, seized power himself. President Amin accelerated the Soviet-style reforms in Afghanistan, and some, including the Russians, felt that he was too ruthless and was going ahead too fast. But Amin never lacked confidence. In Kabul's film archives, we've discovered a unique documentary which the president actually made himself. It glorifies his own role in the original coup in 1978. The film starts with a reconstruction of President Amin's version of how he came to be arrested. He's visited by the police, who unfortunately catch him red-handed in the act of trying to hide some secret papers. They're forced to take possession of the documents themselves. But before the president is separated from his family and hauled away to prison, he's allowed to give some housekeeping money to his wife. What the film does not explain is how the president managed to organize the revolution while still in custody. He's depicted giving orders for the attack from a cell with a telephone. Eventually, he emerges victorious, brandishing his handcuffs on the top of a tank. These sequences are now used by the present regime to discredit Amin, whom they say was a CIA agent. President Amin had only been in power for 3 months when he himself was toppled. How he died on his way from the old presidential palace in Kabul, the People's House, has never been fully revealed. It's been claimed in the West that the Kremlin was alarmed by his performance and, in desperation, ordered that he should be murdered. The Russians invaded, and when order had been restored, so the theory goes, brought in the more flexible Babrak Karmal. How did President Amin die?
Well, I've explained to you that the sound forces of our party, government, Revolutionary Council, the majority, determined to crush the regime of Amin in his bond. And in this way, legally approved by the Revolutionary Council, that Amin must to be in revolutionary court, sentenced to death.
How did he die?
Well, I was not in the time of dying of him, but sentenced to death legally.
In the 1950s, Babrak Karmal, the son of an Afghan army general, was the leader of an insignificant Marxist party at Kabul University. By 1979, his energies and skills at political intrigue were rewarded with the highest post in the revolution. Through the party-controlled press and television, he was presented to the people as the champion of modernization and unity.
And getting of greater and bigger harvests. At the end of the session, the president of the Revolutionary Council embraces the toiling peasants, which depicts the deep link between the peasants and the revolutionary government.
رفیق گرامی Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev.
Babra Karmal has been a frequent visitor to the Kremlin, where he's long been cultivated by the Soviet leadership. He's responded, it seems, by being more receptive than his predecessors to Russian advice. This close relationship was emphasized only last December when he was allowed to present President Brezhnev with Afghanistan's highest revolutionary honor, the Son of Freedom Medal. The ceremony, which took place in the Kremlin, included the inevitable congratulatory speeches. It was filmed by Soviet television, who were also allowed to record President Brezhnev's reply.
Дорогой товарищ Кармат, я искренне тронут решением Центрального комитета Народно-демократической партии Афганистана.
We are ready to discuss politically, solve about around Afghanistan, with Pakistan, with Iran, and a very flexible policy, peaceful policy we have proposed. But there is American, United States imperialists, hegemonies, and reaction, and Pakistan, they don't want to go back the military contingent, limited contingent military of Soviet Union from Afghanistan, because they want to have a pretext against anti-Soviet Union. That is very clear.
If it is true that you do have a strong army and that most of the people in Afghanistan support your revolution, why is it that we are not even allowed to leave the capital?
Soviet. From where you think that we have not permission to go from the Kabul outside?
That we are not able to leave this capital?
Do you know, in the revolutionary time, for some times, because of the minimum we don't want to risk, because of the security, minimum. That is, even Ashrar, you think maybe against you, some terrorists come. This is a idiot.
This is just precautionary.
Precaution for time being.
We would like to go to the second and third largest cities in your country, which in the West are said to be controlled by the Mujahideen.
Well, Mujahideen, it is created by the Reagan administrations. There is no, we say, anti-revolution bandits.
But do you control those two cities?
What? Completely under control. All cities. The majority of the territory of Afghanistan is under the control of the government.
You control all Afghanistan?
Yeah. This is a process. This process. Do you know it's revolution? You speak like this that you not studied about revolution. In revolution time, there come sometimes like these difficulties. It is nature for a revolution.
But we are told that we cannot leave your capital.
We live in revolutionary situation. There is some difficulties, natural, but our government, our party, and the National Fatherland Front, our people are going in very good process to normalize the country. But it is reaction, imperialism, hegemonism, that they put difficulties, hindrance to be normalized the country. It is the fact. You agree or not agree, but it is hard fact.
The regime claims that there's now growing support for their revolution, and as proof have brought us to see a bus factory in the city. Here, we're told, workers put in a voluntary half-day without pay once a week to help in the struggle against the counter-revolutionaries. They're adapting Russian lorries and turning them into buses for the Afghan army. What the workers make of the accompaniment of revolutionary speeches is difficult to tell. They're lectured about land reform and the dangers of foreign intervention in Afghanistan, but can't be trusted to leave the premises without being searched. The regime's constant theme is that there's a conspiracy in the West which is trying to engineer its downfall by infiltrating weapons.
This is Radio Afghanistan calling Europe.
This is Radio Afghanistan Kabul, and here is the news. 43 cases of bullets for 303 bore guns, an Egyptian Kalashnikov, 11,300 other bullets of various types, including rocket launchers and mines, and 170 various types of weapons, 45 mortar shells, light and heavy machine guns, typewriters and cameras have recently been seized from the counter-revolutionary bandits in different parts of...
And the other main story in this bulletin is an allegation that in a laboratory in Pakistan, the CIA are breeding mosquitoes to spread disease in Afghanistan.
This one's here.
In Kabul, the Museum of Weapons, allegedly captured from the counter-revolutionaries, is an obligatory visit for all newcomers. Certainly, many of these guns were made in the West, but there's nothing in this collection which is particularly powerful or sophisticated, and many of these weapons could well have been around in the Afghan mountains for years.
Here is the military base of the counter-revolutionary elements located beyond our frontiers inside Pakistan. The first nucleus of the counter-revolutionaries emerged from here. The assistance of Washington provided new tasks for CIA agents in the frontier of Pakistan.
The Kabul government claims that among the refugee camps in Pakistan, there are 80 military bases with CIA and Chinese instructors whose task is to train counter-revolutionary saboteurs. The evidence they've produced is not altogether convincing.
These fire kindlers, who wear fake beards for camouflage purposes, are equipped with venomous publications and anti-people propaganda material. These criminals who are opposed to the people, revolution, and the country have been dispatched by their dirtiest supporters, that is international imperialism led by the American imperialism, in alliance with the Chinese hegemonists and the reactionary circles of Pakistan in order to disrupt the orderly and peaceful life of our compatriots.
In Kabul's eyes, Western help and propaganda for the rebels is the biggest obstacle to any settlement, and they're particularly irritated by the way many Western leaders have visited camps in the border areas.
There's a conspiracy against our revolution. It begins from the Washington, from the London, from the West Germany.
From London?
Also from London. You see, for example, Thatcher came to Pakistan. He even for the first time came to the border. Why? What was the interesting of Thatcher to come to our borders?
You're talking about Mrs. Thatcher, the Prime Minister, when she came.
Mrs. Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Britain. And clearly is speaking about our revolution.
How long do you think the Russian troops will stay in Afghanistan?
Well, we cannot say this. At the time that imperialism are not interfering in our country, not attacking, at that time troops will go
when the Western country promises that they won't attack our country, then they would send their agents to Afghanistan for destruction, then the Russian troops will leave Afghanistan.
Are you seriously saying the Western countries are attacking Afghanistan?
You know, it is obvious, you know, when some of the people who are destroying our country, when they are, catched by the military forces, they discovered, you know, all the guns that they had in their hands, all the machine guns and all the things, they were made in the Eastern countries. You know, they had the guns from Germany, from America, from China, in all these countries. We have different kinds of enemies. You know, they don't want our revolution to be successful.
In the 19th century, Britain fought 3 wars in Afghanistan and lost thousands of men. Britain was worried that Tsarist Russia, which was giving practical presents even then, might encroach on the back door of her Indian empire, and so intrigued to make Afghanistan a buffer state. After spending considerable energies in the days of the so-called Great Game, attempts to pacify Afghanistan floundered in tribal uprisings and treachery. The British installed puppet leaders in the capital, but eventually withdrew and left the Afghans to themselves. Today, there's still a British embassy in Kabul, but its lifestyle has fallen on hard times, and like all Western outposts here, it's been demoted to the status of a small mission. But as the grandeur of the grounds and buildings prove, Britain once had considerable influence here. She was humbled by the same problems which now face the Russians. There are a number of uncanny parallels between what the Russians are now trying to do in Afghanistan and what the British tried to do here in the 19th century. In 1880, for instance, Lord Hartington, who was Gladstone's new Secretary of State for India, summarised the lessons Britain had learned in Afghanistan like this: as the result of 2 campaigns, the employment of an enormous force and the expenditure of large sums of money, all that has yet been accomplished has been the disintegration of the state, which it was desired to see strong, friendly and independent, the assumption of unwelcome liabilities in one of its provinces, and a condition of anarchy throughout the remainder of the country. Well, the Russians, for all their alleged good intentions, may well soon find that Afghan history has a habit of repeating itself.